phenomenal followers, friends, and family.
Welcome back to Young Black Married Christian Podcast.
Now, we know you fall into one of those categories. You may fall into some of those categories. But even if you fall into none of those categories, we promise you over the next few minutes, we will give you 4 to 5 tips to fortify the future of your marriage.
Now, we know you're short on time. We know you're short on data. But do us a favor. If you can't make it all the way through the podcast, click the download button that's attached to the podcast and take us with you throughout your day.
There's a lot to get into, but we're going to do it for you.
This is your host, LaShad and Doriana James from all the way down in San Antonio, Texas, making sure that your spouse does not become one of your exes. Don't look at me like that. I love working hard to make sure your spouse doesn't become one of your exes. It's essentially the same thing, Doriana. Don't do that to me. Okay, let's get started. All right, Doriana, what is our topic for today?
Today's topic is boundaries when dealing with the opposite sex.
Why is that even important, Doriana? Who cares? I mean, let's just be friends. Like, can't we just all be friends? It's 2019.
No, we can't.
No, I mean, just, we'll just text everyone that we want to text and hang out with people. And I have this work friend that wants me to just hang out. What's wrong with that? I don't understand.
So boundaries are about prioritizing your marriage, and that means that your relationship takes first place over any other friendship, and it's also about protecting your marriage. You show a really large amount of respect for your spouse when you prove that you're willing to go out of your way in order for them to know that they can truly trust you, fully trust you, especially when it comes to these friendships or relationships with people of the opposite sex.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know that I had to learn the hard way that there is no friendship on this planet that is worth sacrificing my marriage for. Like, if you don't like somebody, then that's just kind of how we're going to have to roll with it. I got to trust your intuition on that. And so there is a part where I might not see something wrong, but you see something wrong. So I got to prioritize my marriage over these friendships. Doriana, and just talking to you off the cuff here, what do you see are some of the dangers of if there are no boundaries with people of the opposite sex? What are the dangers that are out there for people who are married or people who are dating?
So yeah, that's definitely a good question. And we kind of get into these points that talk about what could happen. Of course, we have the good tips on what to do and how to maintain boundaries, how to set up boundaries, and also some of the bad outcomes that can come from not respecting these boundaries or understanding. Marriage is constantly one of those things that we're constantly like fixing, tweaking, maintaining, working on. So here are 4 things that every couple must do to keep boundaries with the opposite sex. Number 1, do not be friends with anyone your spouse does not feel comfortable with. No exceptions.
And so this is an important one, because if you're like me, you can't really notice some of the things that females do whenever they're attracted to you. And there are some guys or even some females that are just completely oblivious to the fact that someone's attracted to them and that they may be trying to go to a level of intimacy that's not appropriate. And so the number one defense you can have is, if it's not your homeboys or your homegirls, it's your spouse that can be next to you to say, hey, that person has something else on their mind. Like, you told that joke and they laugh for like 40 seconds, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it wasn't that funny. Because when I tell a joke, I'm like, yo, that joke was fire. Everyone starts laughing. I may have somebody in my life that could be a female, she starts laughing. I'm like, yo, I guess I'm a funny dude. And my wife's like, listen, I love you, babe, but you're not that funny. Like, she was laughing because she wants you to think that she approves of you, or whatever it could be. And again, these are relationships that I'm completely oblivious to. They're friendships that I may have, that people I may have just met, but she has a sense of what the female could be thinking that I don't quite understand. She also has a good sense of the things that I say that could be misinterpreted by females. So there are some times where I'm speaking and I say something to be nice, and she's like, LaShad, you can't phrase words that way, or LaShad, you can't speak that way, because a female is going to interpret that a little bit differently. Like, you're being a little bit too friendly, or a little bit too intimate. And she's not saying that I'm intending to do that. She's not accusing me of trying to cheat. She's not accusing me of doing anything. She's just letting me know that I have some blind spots into how females operate and how they think, and she's trying to protect me and keep me safe. So fellas or ladies, if your significant other tells you that they don't like somebody, and it's not, again, this isn't just like a jealousy thing or something to be petty, but they can sense something that you can't see and they're trying to let you know, it's probably best to listen to them.
Yeah, and we can't really be ridiculous by fighting for that friendship. Once your spouse has waved the red flag, it's kind of like, hey, well, that's what wifey says, or that's what my husband says, and this means that this is kind of it.
Listen, I'll be real with you. I'm going to be friends with you for maybe a year. If I'm thinking of this other person. We may be friends for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but I'm going to be married to my wife until I die. And so, when I weigh those two, I'm like, I got to make sure I'm protecting the relationship I have with my wife before I'm fighting for friendships that may come and go and are not as important as the relationship I have with my wife.
Yes. So number 2, don't share private details of your marriage with anyone of the opposite sex. You can lean on a mentor, a pastor, maybe like a life coach, or a trusted friend of the same sex, but anyone of opposite sex, you're not supposed to be sharing deep private details of your marriage with them.
Okay, so here's the definition, right? This is intimacy. And an easy way of thinking of intimacy is just into me, see. And that's a weird little play on words there. But anytime you're revealing deep parts of yourself to somebody else, you're achieving a level of intimacy. If someone tells you their, one of their deepest, darkest secrets that they've never shared with anybody, that's an intimate moment. If someone's showing you a part of their body that no one else has ever seen before, that is an intimate moment. So intimacy is not just physical, it's also emotional. And in some ways, it can also be spiritual. And so you definitely don't want to have, moments that are too intimate with the opposite sex, because here's what's going to happen. You're sharing yourself, emotionally with somebody. There's the tendency to try to consummate that in a physical way. Mm-hmm. And so we have small gestures of hugs and high fives and highs and in the way we greet one another. But if you're continuing to be emotionally intimate with somebody, there is that temptation to turn it into something that's more physical. Yeah. And so this tip right here is saying that not to share private details of your marriage with anyone of the opposite sex. That's just one tip to say, hey, you don't want to have the intimate moments of your marriage being on display for somebody who's not inside of that marriage. And so you definitely want to guard against that. And then the second part of that wisdom is, if you're going through a rough time in your life, you don't want to advertise that that's the time for all the I don't know what to call them, the people to come out the woodworks to be like, oh, they're going through a rough time. Like, you coughing because you want to say, you're going through a rough time for me to slide on in, and she not doing it, you need it, kind of. And so here's the thing. You do not want to fulfill legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. Yes, legitimately, we need to feel loved by our spouse. Legitimately, we need companionship. Legitimately, there are sexual needs that you feel like you have, but you don't want to fulfill those legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. And we definitely don't want to advertise that we have needs that aren't being met inside of our marriage to people who might want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, number 3. Also, you don't want to become the shoulder for someone of the opposite sex to cry on. So the article is funny. It said, hand them a tissue and walk away. And you have to set that healthy boundary. But this person is not, in the same way you don't share intimate details of your marriage with this person of the opposite sex, you should not allow them to share intimate details of their marriage or their relationship with you, and you be that sounding board for them.
Yes. And again, this just goes all the way back to intimacy. And here's the thing, guys, without boundaries, I want you to think of a friendship much like you think of a nice warm campfire. I want you to imagine yourself sitting with marshmallows and you're roasting those marshmallows on that nice, safe campfire, and you scoot up close to it because, it keeps you warm when it's cold. And the thing that's beautiful about that campfire is that it has boundaries. There's this, it's either rocks or something that actually sets the boundaries for how hot the flame is going to get. Now imagine, what kind of fire would you have without any boundaries? If the fire could just leap off of the fireplace or out of the fire pit and then start lighting up sleeping bags and tents and your shoes and your food, and it's just out of control. In the same way, we have relationships and we have intimacy with people, it's going to want to grow. We want to increase our intimacy. We want to deepen our friendships. We want to go, deeper into the relationships that we have with people. Without boundaries, it can quickly turn dark. Any friendship without boundaries can quickly turn dark. Any pleasure without boundaries can quickly turn dark. And so what we're saying here is that we're not trying to be, legalistic. We're not trying to bind people up, but we're just trying to say there is wisdom in having good boundaries in your friendships so that you can scoot up close and enjoy them, but having some hard lines set to where people aren't overstepping boundaries and we're not getting out of control with our levels of intimacy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Just like he says a lot of times, the difference between a campfire and a forest fire are those boundaries.
They're boundaries. That's simple. You got boundaries, you got a campfire. No boundaries, forest fire.
Okay, and number 4. So don't ever, never, ever be alone with a person of the opposite sex outside of work unless you and your spouse agree ahead of time. Romantic relationships, they usually come out of recreational activities or intimate conversations. So if you're spending more time having fun with this friend, it can easily lead to something more, something dark, something that you don't originally intend for it to go.
Yes. And so here's the thing. Don't put yourself in tough situations to have to make tough decisions. Think about that. A lot of times we have friendships where we're putting ourselves in intimate romantic environments, and then that's when we have to say no, or that's when the thought crosses our mind and we feel bad about having these thoughts. It's because you're putting yourself in tough situations to have to make tough decisions. Sometimes the best way to say no to something is not giving yourself the opportunity to say yes. Seriously, sometimes the best way to say no to something is don't give yourself the opportunity to say yes. Don't put yourself in a romantic situation. Don't put yourself in a romantic environment or intimate environment where it's just you and someone of the opposite sex alone together. And I know, again, this isn't to sound legalistic. These are just wise rules. If you have a friend at work that wants to go out and eat, just try to do it in a group, or try to, do it in a public place, and just as best as you can, just try not to have those intimate moments, intimate friendships, because how many times have you heard your friends or people say, one thing led to another? Listen, we're trying to tell you what that little one thing is. It seems like you trip and follow and you don't know how it happens. Well, we're trying to show you this is the part where people trip. This is the part where people fall. This is the one thing that leads to another. And so again, we're not trying to bind you up or be legalistic, but if you can talk with your spouse and establish these rules ahead of time, these are things that are going to keep your marriage safe in the long run, because you're not going to allow for these silly mistakes to happen because you put yourself in intimate environments. You were the shoulder to cry on. You shared so much about your marriage, and then one thing led to another. Now you're emotionally involved with somebody that you're not supposed to be, or physically involved with someone who you're not supposed to be.
Yeah. And that kind of brings up a good action step for you and your marriage or in your relationship. Talk to your spouse or who you're in a relationship with and ask if there's any friends in your life that they don't feel 100% comfortable with. And then you can come up with a realistic game plan on how to back away from that friendship or stop investing in that friendship. But this is a good time to ask that hard, honest question to your spouse so you can start setting up these healthy boundaries.
Doriana, let me ask you this. How many times in our relationship have you had to tell me that there's somebody I should either watch out for or slow down the friendship with, and kind of walk us through what was that like?
About 375.
You better stop.
Just kidding. No, it's only a few people, a handful. And it was always kind of hey.
What did you see that I didn't see? Or what did you see that you had to communicate to me?
It was just a lot of time spent, a lot of effort to be in your presence. And I'm okay, Lashad, you're cool, but you're actually not that cool. Why is there a point for this person to be only hanging out with you, finding reasons to message you or hit you up, or finding reasons to come over?
And stupid me, I thought they were all legitimate reasons.
Yeah, I have this for you if you want some. I don't know. It's simple things hey, I have some fruit that I cut up. I was
trying to eat healthy. I thought you were trying to be a good friend.
It's just why don't you? No, why are you bringing him fruit? Or hey, I bought this trail mix for you, and I know you like trail mix. Why do you know what he likes?
I so happen to like trail mix. I don't know who doesn't like trail mix. I thought it was.
Yeah, but he was kind of oblivious to it. So it's one of those things. I was okay, Lashad, this is not a thing. There's no reason for anybody. First of all, I know with my husband, he likes food. So if you bring him food, like you're about to, if you're a female and you bring him food or offer to bring him food, you're about to get axed. Like, you're not about to feed him. So no, you don't know what his favorite meal is. No, you're not gonna bring him lunch or anything to snack on.
You sound pretty jealous right now. What's going
I'm
on?
not jealous. I just know things.
You just trying to keep me safe.
Yeah. So no, you're not gonna feed my man. He'll starve before he eats from you. He better get some food himself. No.
So no, that's pretty good. So here's and for fellas or ladies out there, there was a specific instance where there was a female in my life that we were close friends, and I realized like we were clicking on a lot of different levels, and our relationship was getting too friendly. And it wasn't, again, nothing happened, there was nothing physical there, it was just, it was just a lot, it was just a really nice friendship. And so I had to look her in the face and say, hey, listen, this is, you're a really, nice, single, attractive female, and we're really close friends, and I really like you as a friend, but because of that, I'm actually going to start limiting the time that we spend together. And I know we've texted, a lot recently, and we've been around each other a lot. We've driven, because we were actually, we lived in the same hometown city, so we actually drove from the college back to home because we literally lived like up the street from each other. But those car rides, again, that's an intimate setting, and again, nothing happened, but there was a lot that was going on there. So I told her, listen, you're my friend, I really, really like you, but because I really like you and because we're really friends, I'm actually going to start limiting the time that we spend together. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, and I'm not saying that you like me or that I like you in a negative way, but I'm just saying, to protect us, I'm trying to limit the amount of time that we spend together. And they understood. First of all, they took it as a compliment because I'm saying, yeah, you're really friendly and you're attractive, but then they can't argue with the fact that we don't want to continue to keep spending time together. And I think the one trap that we fall into is this brother-sister trap. I'm about to go there. Yeah, I'm gonna go there. Oh, this my big bro. This my big sis. This my little sis. Oh no, what are you talking about? We're like brother sister. Like, no, we're not though. We're not brother sister. Like, I get the sentiment that you're trying to put forth, but at the end of the day, we don't have that family love that's attached to us. We have a friend love that's attached to us. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference there, because family love, it doesn't, for me at least, or for most people I know, it doesn't turn sexual or dark that quickly. But for friendship, there's if you have a deep friendship with someone of the opposite sex,
very thin line.
It's a very thin line. One day you look up, you're like, why don't I touch that person? Like, we're so friends. Like, what's stopping us from? And so I don't want to get there. I didn't want to get there. So here's the tip, guys. If there's, or ladies, if there's somebody in your life right now that is a super, super close friend, and that nothing's happened yet, but you're probably in a very intimate friendship that's probably not safe, just tell the person, I really like you and you're super cool. So because I really like you and because I don't want anything to ever happen to our friendship, mm-hmm. I'm not going to text you late at night. I'm not going to return any of your text messages late at night. We're not going to be alone together in a room, and we're going to hang out a little less than we are now, but that's to protect our friendship.
Or if I really like someone, then I'll be like, hey, I should totally introduce you to my husband, and you guys can become super close friends.
That too. So, that's it for today. We promised you that in 4 to 5 minutes, we give you 45 tips to fortify the future of your marriage. But if you're looking on your phone right now, you're like, wait a minute, there's still like 10 minutes left in the episode. How are they saying goodbye? We're going to give you guys a gift. This special gift is from The Vault, our Inner Circle premium episodes. We're going to give you about maybe 7 to 10 minutes of what you might be missing out on if you are not part of our Inner Circle, if you're not part of getting those premium episodes. Also, if you haven't got our training course yet on communication, oh my goodness, our marriage course is fire. I just beefed it up. We just put like 17 extra quizzes in it. Listen, I'm guaranteeing you right now, if you buy the training course and you watch the videos and you do the quizzes and it does not improve your marriage, I will refund you the entire amount. I am that confident in this product. And so click the link in the description of this episode. We have a training course. Watch it with your spouse. It's going to bless your life. It's going to teach you how to budget. It's going to teach you how to be proactive with your communication. It's going to teach you how to fight fair. Listen, all the tips that you love on this podcast, we've actually captured them in one place for you where you can replay the videos, listen to some of the content that we have, and take some of the quizzes, and you're going to love it. It's going to bless your life. So click the link in the description of this episode and go ahead and buy that. And again, if you take all of it and you email me, it's like, you know what, I loved it, but it's not changing my marriage, or I loved it, and I took the action steps, but it's actually not improving my communication, I will refund you the entire amount of what you're paying for, because I stand behind that product just that much. So listen, we love you. Shout out to the Butler family. I think they got access to their premium episodes, and so hey, we love you. This is a listener sponsored show right now. So without further ado, here is a premium episode from the vault, and we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
So today, this information is coming from the Gottman Institute, and we'll share that link with you. But we're talking about the 4 horsemen of divorce, or the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These are things that are going to destroy your relationship. And so I guess we could get right into it. And while you're listening, here's your homework. While you're listening to this, listen to see if any of these are inside of your marriage, or which one of these is most prevalent in your marriage. Now, I know a lot of people are going to default to be like, oh no, we don't have any of these. They're so great. We don't know.
Yeah.
But you need to look for the one that's most prevalent inside of your marriage, because if you can identify it, we're going to share with you some of the antidotes on how to fight against it to make sure it's not inside of your marriage. So number 1, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. So the first horseman is criticism. Now, criticizing your partner, it's different than just offering a critique or voicing a complaint. Now, those two have to deal with specific issues, whereas criticizing is an attack on a person's character. It's an attack on the core of your partner, who their character is. It's also, in effect, you are pretty much dismantling or like unwinding their whole being when you criticize.
Yes. And a lot of times we can't really tell the difference between trying to offer, something that's constructive versus something that's just destructive. Right. And so we have to kind of parse this out. What's the difference between criticism? What's the difference between being constructive? And how can we learn the difference between the two of them?
Yeah. So there's definitely a difference between expressing a complaint and criticizing. So for example, a complaint could be like, oh, I was scared when you were running late. I thought you were going to call me. I thought we agreed that we would do that for each other. Whereas criticism would be, oh, well, you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you. I don't believe you're that forgetful. You're selfish. You never think of me. You never think of others. So you could tell the difference between one being constructive and kind of talking about how it made you feel, talking about feelings, where the other one was purposefully attacking the other person.
Exactly. So here's the tip, guys. Whenever you are trying to issue a complaint and you don't want it to turn into a criticism, you can use these I statements. I was scared when you were running late and you didn't call me, and I thought that we agreed that we would do that for each other. Do you see how those I statements are talking about, my feelings, not necessarily who you are? And so your actions made me feel a certain way. And then we can go back to those expectations that we talk about in our training course to say, hey, we have to set and manage each other's expectations. So if I expected that you would call me because we agreed upon that, then that's what we need to follow through with. And so, again, managing those expectations, that's, one tip. Using those I statements, like I was scared when you were running late. That's another tip. And the last tip is when you are trying to offer a complaint, instead of attacking someone's character by saying you never think about how you're affecting other people, you're forgetful, you're selfish. Instead, you need to call them higher. You need to only identify, don't try to put an identity on them that God didn't call them. If God didn't call them forgetful, if God didn't call them, selfish, don't try to use those type of verbs to attack their identity.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is saying, I know you love us, and I know you're busy. I know you're running around trying to provide for the family and take care of, all the other responsibilities that you have. But while you're doing that, can you please remember to call? So do you see how now I'm identifying with a character that a character trait that I like inside of my spouse, and then calling them higher to say, I know that you can do better. I've seen you do better before. And now I just want to see that a little more.
Yeah. Awesome. So now the second horseman is contempt. Now, when we communicate with contempt, we're being truly mean. We treat others with disrespect. We mock them. Sarcasm is really big with contempt. Ridicule, name calling, mimicking them, or body language like eye rolling or, scoffing, like sucking teeth. So the target of contempt is made to like feel despised and worthless. And contempt goes like really far beyond just criticism. Criticism attacks your partner's character, but contempt it makes the partner who's using it almost assume a position of superiority over their spouse or over their partner. It could sound kind of like, oh, well, you're tired, cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day. I've been running around, trying to keep the house going, and all you do is come home and sit on the couch. You don't have to do what I have to do. So it's kind of that asserting yourself to a superior position over your partner.
And so one of the important things about contempt is that it is the single greatest predictor of a divorce. It has to be eliminated. If you and your spouse are showing contempt for each other, when you're actually attacking someone from some sort of moral high ground or some sort of superior high ground, you have to go ahead and eliminate that and stop that. One of the ways of doing that is having what we call like a mutual understanding of where each other is at. And so, for instance, if we're arguing about chores or housework, maybe I need to understand what's going on in your schedule, what's going on inside of your life that's causing this. And instead of attacking your character and arguing from my emotions, instead of talking about my emotions, I need to just take a step back. And so here's one tip: a 5-minute break or a 20-minute break to say, you know what, I'm really upset and I don't want to say something permanently based off of my temporary feelings. And so I'm just going to take a 20-minute break and say, I'm just going to pull back off of this, and then we'll come back in 20 minutes. And then I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking you. Another tip is actually having rules of engagement, rules for whenever you fight. And again, we talk about this inside of our training course as well, that when emotions get heated and people are tired and we start arguing with one another, we have to have some sort of rules of which we use so that we don't make those permanent decisions based off of temporary feelings.
Yeah.
So maybe one rule is I'm not going to name call, or I'm not going to roll my eyes, or I'm not going to raise my voice, or I'm not going to call you out of your name. And all of those things that normally I use to show contempt, I'm not going to use that. And so a really big takeaway here is that you and your spouse need to get together and write out a list of those things that push each other's buttons. You know that better than we do. We're giving you examples, but you need to actually do the work and say, okay, honey, what's something that I do in our arguments that's not productive, that if I stopped, we could probably have, cleaner fights. And normally those are the contempt. That's where you'll see some of the contempt. Again, name calling, body language, eye rolling, sarcasm, whatever one kind of jumps onto the list, find it, eliminate it, because again, this is the number one predictor of divorce. And so we have to get it out of our marriage.
Yes. Okay. So number 3, the third horseman is defensiveness. And usually defensiveness, it's almost a response to criticism. Now, we've all probably been defensive. And this horseman, it's pretty much all around us when relationships are on the rocks. When we feel unjustly accused, we pretty much fish for excuses. We want to sometimes play innocent victim so that